This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about how to celebrate progress in your homeschool, not perfection, with a special guest, Sonya Shafer. She's a popular homeschool speaker and writer specializing in the Charlotte Mason method. She has been on an adventure for more than 20 years studying, researching, practicing, and teaching Charlotte Mason's gentle and effective methods of education. Sonya has a special place in her heart for our community, homeschooling parents with special needs children. Her youngest daughter has autism and pervasive developmental delays, and she's now an adult, and her daughter still enjoys their daily homeschool lessons. And so I'm just excited. Sonya is also a member of the SPED Homeschool Board of Directors and a dear mentor of mine as well. So welcome, Sonya. I'm just excited to have you here today to discuss this very important topic.
Thanks so much, Peggy. It's a delight to be back with you.
Yes, yeah, it's been a while. We actually met on this broadcast and then stayed in touch after that, and it's been a blessing to me to get to know Sonya over the years. And I know you'll just enjoy this conversation that we are going to have today, and getting to know her better. So if you're joining us, we'd love you to be part of the conversation. Feel free to put in comments, questions. We had one question submitted ahead of the show that we'll be including in our conversation as well. And so if you want to be able to do that and submit questions ahead of the show, if you can't be with us live, just subscribe to our email list, and you will get those reminders that the show is coming up and that you can submit your questions, and then you'll get reminders right before the show starts to join us live. So just kind of a fun little way to stay interactive in your busy schedule, because we know that it is. So Sonya, I would just love, as we're getting started, for you just to share a little bit more about yourself and your family, and anything else that God lays on your heart to start out with.
I'd be happy to. My husband and I have been married. Oh goodness, tomorrow's our anniversary. See, I forgot about that.
Congratulations!
Till just now.
I know after a while
I forgot. Yeah, it'll be 39 years tomorrow, and we have
awesome.
4 children, 4 daughters. I call them my little women. They range in age from 33 down to, my youngest is 25 now, and she's the one who has special needs. And I've been homeschooling her for 21 years. I figured that out. But when I started homeschooling, it was probably more than 26 years ago.
Wow.
If someone had told me, in 21 years, you'll still be homeschooling,
right,
I would have just dropped in a heap on the floor. But so much of doing this is just do the next thing.
Yes.
Just
so
be
true.
faithful
Absolutely.
to do the next thing. And the Lord has shown me over these years that it's not a sprint, it is a marathon.
Yes.
And that you only have to take one step at a time. You don't even have to know
so true
how you're going to get to the finish line. It's just
exactly
do the next thing. It's so easy to put a huge, oh, look at me, I'm preaching already, but
yep, that's okay. Yeah, we love it.
It's just so easy to take on this homeschooling as a huge burden and responsibility. And it all rests on me, and I've got to make it succeed. I've got to do this perfectly, or I'm a failure. And that's not how we can be our best in this situation. That's not how God wants us to approach parenting and educating our children.
Yeah.
That's a paralyzing thought.
It is,
But
absolutely.
instead, it's what I have learned over the years is that small, constant touches add up to something great.
They
If
do.
if
Yeah.
I can just do that small, be faithful, be sure to be
Mhm.
consistent and constant in it, but even if those are small touches, they're gonna add up, and
Yeah.
that has been a very freeing idea.
So did you always start out homeschooling that way, or has that been a progress in learning how to do that?
It's been progress. Yeah, I'm a very, productive, addicted person, if you wanna put it that way. I I want to set those goals, and I want to achieve those goals, and I'll do what it takes to get those goals done.
Right.
So, um, starting out, I was putting that kind of pressure on myself and not probably overtly on my kids, but it's in the atmosphere. I mean,
Oh,
they pick
yeah,
up
they
on
pick
it
it up,
real quickly.
absolutely. Mhm.
So it was a process over the years of the Lord gently but firmly prying my fingers off of this. And I think a lot of it came when he gave me my youngest. Her given name is Hannah, but I'm
Uh-huh.
calling her Holly because that's she likes to choose preferred names different
Okay.
days. And
Yes.
today it is Holly, so out of respect to her, I'm going to call her Holly.
Okay.
Um,
That
but
works.
he giving me Holly just kind of turned my world upside down. My nice, neat little structured, goal-oriented world
Yeah.
upside down because now it was a whole new set of rules.
Right. Yeah, and rules that I don't know, your rules change on a daily basis too.
Yeah, yeah, or even hourly basis, yes.
Right. Yes, yes, and, was that difficult for you? I mean, did you go through some of a grieving process or, just a struggle within yourself as to how to reorient yourself not to be so, this is the goal for the day, and then it just doesn't get done? How does that start to process?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I went through a grieving process and I'm still in it because at times it will still hit me upside the head and come out of nowhere, and I just
Wow. Yeah.
go into it. Um, Mainly, it wasn't so much for me, it was for my daughter and
Oh,
the
yes.
limitations that she
Right.
has to deal with here in this physical body on earth. It's the limitations, and it was a gradual process to get to the point where I could recognize that the limitations do not define who she is.
Oh, that's good. Yes.
It's there's more to her than her limitations, and I need to see that. And all of those things were a process that the
Right.
Lord showed me through his small, constant touches in my life. And I think it was because of as I embraced and recognized
Yeah.
his way of dealing with his children,
Hmm.
that I began to feel more comfortable
Right.
or try more intentionally to implement those with my children. And it's
Yeah.
all about growth. That's the thing.
Exactly. Yes.
The Lord doesn't say, "Oh, man, you should have learned I had planned for you to learn that lesson 2
Right.
years ago, but you didn't match up." It's not that. It's just keep growing, keep growing. And that's how we
Right.
need to approach educating our children because 'cause we're
Mhm.
educating the whole person. It's not just how many facts can we dump in their heads. It is growth as a person.
So how do you make that switch from growth to, that goal? It's growth versus, this is the task we have to complete today. What does that look like?
I still have the goals in my head. I
Mhm.
still plan. Um, but it is not so much now that we want to be to this stage by this certain date because
Okay.
that's what's that based on?
Yeah,
The,
exactly.
the
That's an
Picking a
educated guess.
date. I mean, even if it's like, well, but that's graduation date. That's a man-made standard. Your child must graduate by this certain age and
Right.
have jumped through these hoops by this certain time. And so I needed to give myself freedom to
Ah,
distinguish
yes. Love
between
that.
what are man-made standards, what are human standards, and versus taking it one step at a time and focusing on the person in front of me, not the goal. When I
Yeah.
set a
Okay.
goal, I
Hmm.
can get tunnel vision,
Yeah.
and I just look at that goal and I plow over anything that's between me and the goal.
So just unfortunately our families a lot of the time. Yes.
And by doing that, we can get things done, but we are not respecting and treasuring the
Right.
souls that are in our care,
Hmm.
temporarily in physical bodies, but eternal souls. So that's just been a gradual change. So,
Yeah.
practically speaking, yes, I still set my goals. I
Hmm.
still say, this is what we want to do, but I have tweaked it a little bit to say there is no ahead or behind.
Yes.
There is
So
only,
good.
this is where we are now, and what is the next step in the direction I want to head. So my goal is more of, this is the direction I want to head,
Yeah.
but what is the next step to get there?
Yeah, that is a huge shift because
Yeah.
it we just seem to get hammered with the education system that it's all about goals, it's all about reaching those goals, and we miss the child in the process. We miss the beauty of what we are doing because
Mm.
like you said, we're looking so far ahead than where we are right now and the moment that we're in, and that's where the beauty, the freedom, all of that comes together, and that's when we can focus on celebrating. I do want to come, we are going to move into celebrating and talk more about the just the process of how that all looks. But one thing I want to ask you about too is, did any of your kids struggle with perfectionism themselves? Because I know a lot of kids on the spectrum tend to have that perfectionist attitude. Did you ever have to deal with that with a child and in your homeschooling at all?
Not to the extreme that some kids have,
Hmm.
where it is debilitating.
Yeah.
With Holly, she the only thing that would bother her is if the things she lined up got out of order. So it
Yes.
wasn't, she was never a perfectionist when it came to schoolwork or chores or anything like that. She's pretty passive.
Hmm.
However, another child I have deals with OCD,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
that can really create that struggle in your
Yes.
head. If you
Hmm.
have leanings toward perfectionism, that OCD can just exacerbate those. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Is
in
there
a
anything
sense,
that you can recommend to parents who have kids that may struggle with that in helping them to, come to, it's a growth process, I get it. But there's some things that we as parents can do to kind of just nurture that growth. Is there anything that you have that you has worked for you in the past?
one thing that I think can be helpful is if we as parents intentionally point out when we have failed at something
Ah,
and show
yes.
how we handle it. That, oh, that recipe was a flop.
Hmm.
I did not do that very well, but you know what? We're just going to try again. I think I'll try that. I think I'm going to change this and try it again next week. So just modeling how
Yeah.
you deal with quote failure.
Right.
Um, and then also, I think another big part of this is celebrating the growth you do see.
Yeah.
Because when we have that goal set out here and we're focused in on it, I don't know about you, but my tendency is no matter how much progress I have made toward that goal, I'm still looking at the distance I still have to go.
Exactly.
I
Yes.
focus
Uh-huh.
on what I've not done yet rather than what I have accomplished. And
Yes.
so by flipping that on its head and celebrating what has been accomplished and the growth you have seen, I
Absolutely.
think that helps too.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think we just my tendency is I can do that so much more for better for my children than myself. Yeah. It is really, really hard to do that. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and the interviewee was asked, they were a coach, and they just said, sometimes I have to ask myself the question that I would ask the people I coach, because I'm realizing that I'm not as forgiving to myself as I'm telling other people to be forgiving to themselves. And that is hard. We hold ourselves to a super high standard, and it seems like all this pressure is on us to do that. And then just, it's so hard to release it. Is there anything that you have to recommend to parents as that it's okay? How do you come to that place where you can say to yourself, it's okay that this is what I'm celebrating, and this is yet how far I have to go?
Well, it's kind of like saying it's okay to be thankful. It's
Yeah,
okay to be grateful. You're not probably the biggest obstacle is, well, I don't want to be prideful and look at what I have done. But
right.
that's not the way you approach it necessarily. You can approach it as, thank you, Lord, for helping me to get this far. Thanks for these ideas. Thank you for the grace to do
Yes.
it every day. Thank you for the
Mhm.
strength. And I'm just so grateful to be able to see we've made a little bit of growth here. Thank you for that. So it's more
Yeah.
a celebration of gratitude to the Lord, not
Mm.
a puffed up pride. Look at what I have done.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, I know, just that practice of daily gratitude. And I've got a journal, and at the very beginning of my prayer journal is a section for thanks. And it has changed how I have perceived, even my time with the Lord, is to start out by thanking him. It just shifts everything, instead of, and then there's this person that I need to pray for, and this issue that's coming up, and I need this. And it's like, yeah. So, but we need that daily, and sometimes hourly, if not more daily,
Yeah.
reset, because everything else around us focuses on what have we yet to do, instead of what's been done and what's been accomplished. And so, yeah.
And it's not a selfish thing to do,
Hmm.
um, because as you are able to be grateful and to celebrate the progress you have seen and the growth that you have noticed, it also gives you confidence moving forward.
Hmm.
It helps lower your blood pressure,
Yes.
and helps you maintain more of a long-term. That's the funny thing about it, is we're looking short term, but it increases our ability to look at the long term and say, we're going to make it. It's going to be okay. Maybe
Yeah.
not by a certain date, but we're going to be able to keep going. So all of those shifts in
Hmm.
your mental stability, if you will, in your
Yeah.
attitude,
Yeah.
are going to come across to your children, because
Absolutely.
the
Yep.
atmosphere that you create is all about your attitudes, your beliefs. So I really like, there's a passage in one of the books that Charlotte Mason wrote about when you were saying it's easier to celebrate with our kids than to celebrate for ourselves. It's
Yes.
also easier for us to say, oh, I think you've about had it. Why don't you take a break, to the kids?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But we won't do it for
We
ourselves.
won't. Yes, exactly.
We
Hmm.
have to keep going. We have to keep pushing, because we have that pressure, that perfectionist mentality. I've got to do this perfectly. And taking a break shows a weakness. So I can't do that. It's like,
Right.
go out to
No,
play,
no, exactly. Yes. Yeah. And for me, it took a lot of, at first, scheduling those breaks, because I
Yes.
was such a box checker that I had to have a box to say rest
Yes,
until
exactly.
I trained myself how to rest. And yeah, but then
There's
you
nothing wrong with
realize,
that. Put it on
yeah,
your list. Yeah.
exactly. But then you realize over time, I'm actually getting more done by doing that, by taking that time for myself, by realizing that I can't just keep pushing through, and my brain needs a break, my body needs a break, and it all works out better. So you had talked a little bit about feeding this this growth, and what could that look like in a homeschool setting, and how can we, once we kind of shift to, I need to do this, and this is something that we're going to prioritize, how can we build in practices to feed that?
That's a big mental shift we had to go through as well. That schoolwork is not just, well, education is not just exercising the child's mind and heart. And a
Right.
lot of what we do for normal, traditional schoolwork is exercising the mind,
Right.
exercising the brain. But we also need to feed it, because just as with our bodies, the way they grow
Yeah.
is you
Yeah.
feed them and you exercise them both. If
Yeah.
you just exercise, Peggy, and never
Yep.
feed, what's going to happen to your body?
You're just going to pass out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we wonder why sometimes the kids just seem to lose interest and
Right.
dry up
Yep.
and
Mhm.
don't want to do the schoolwork. It's probably because all we're doing is exercising their minds. We're not feeding them. And
Oh,
so
that's so good. Yes.
the stuff that can feed them is giving them ideas and good stories that shape how they view the world and shape
Oh, absolutely.
who they are becoming. Even artwork
Yeah.
can beautify and feed the soul. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. We're back to the small constant touches.
Hmm.
I just put a new art piece on display. I've got a little easel in my living room, and I put it on display.
Ah,
And with Holly, we don't there we can't have a description about it. Usually what you would do is look at the piece and then hide it and have the child describe it to you,
mhm.
and then look at it again and discuss things you noticed, and then put it on display for the whole week. Holly's not able to do that, but I can still display it and
Right.
tell her,
Yeah.
oh, this is Sunrise Impression by Monet. That's the one I had last week. And just
Okay.
have it there in a place where she walks by it 2 or 3 times a day. And it's
Right.
just feeding her mind. Same with music. We just put
Right.
on different genre of music as background, not constantly.
Mm. Yeah.
This isn't about. I see so many kids that have the
Oh,
earbuds
yes. Uh-huh.
and they're in their own little world and they have music going constantly. It's not about that. It's about intentionally. We would we call them Ravinia night,
Huh.
because when we lived in Chicago area, there was a Ravinia concerts that would go on over the summer,
Oh,
and
okay.
the Chicago Symphony Orchestra would put these
Oh,
on
that's
in an
amazing.
outdoor amphitheater, and you could just come to the park and pay like $5 and hear this glorious music live. But the rule was no talking when the music was going.
Got
And
it. Yep.
so we would just every once in a while do a Ravinia night with all of our kids.
Huh.
And while we were eating supper, we would do candlelight. We'd do it in the winter so you could actually see the candles,
Right, exactly.
candlelight, and put on some music. And it was just, okay, for this particular meal, no talking. We're just going to listen to the music. And it would just set a whole different atmosphere. So
Oh, yes.
playing music in the background, again, not constantly, but small touches of this. I read a poem to Holly once a week. She might not understand it all,
Mhm.
but she can enjoy the use of words in a creative
Oh,
way.
absolutely.
And a lot of these things are done by faith, that these are feeding
Right.
her soul. And every once in a while, Peggy, the Lord will just open the curtain and give me a little peek.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's in there. And
Right. Yes.
Holly will inadvertently say something or point something out that's like, oh,
You did
it's in there. She's
yeah.
got it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and
Wow.
then time in nature,
Oh,
that
absolutely.
feeds the soul like nothing else can. So often we spend our
So much.
days surrounded by what man has made.
Yes.
But when we get our kids out surrounded by what God has made, it just resets
It
everything,
does. Yep.
feeds their soul in a way nothing else can. So those types
Mm.
of things, it doesn't have to be everything every day, but if we intentionally schedule, it takes me 2 minutes to put a picture on an easel for the week. It takes
Right.
me 3 minutes to read a poem one day. It it takes a couple of minutes to find a good playlist on my phone and turn it on while we're having lunch. So
Right.
these aren't huge things, but they just help to enrich that
They
child as a
do.
person
Yes.
and to
Absolutely.
grow.
Yeah. And you are achieving your goals in that feeding process, but it's much more gentle and much more natural
Yeah.
than if we, were just segmenting and pushing and shoving. And like you said, we're, exercising, but not feeding. And we see kids so tired out because we're pushing them to get to the next goal, to, learn how to read, to, do all these little things that, again, we come back to these um, standards that we
Mhm.
we hold our kids to and ourselves to achieve, and we lose the beauty and we lose the joy, and the freedom is
Yeah, exactly. Let me
wasted.
tell you, a few years ago, I caved in and gave in to that pressure of we are so quote behind with Holly
Uh-huh.
in reading and writing and math. Those things, she was so quote behind. And so I thought, all right, we're going to focus this term, these 12 weeks, we're just going to hunker down and focus on those three things. And we're going to do those in schoolwork every day. And only that, we're going to get those things up and running. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, after 2 weeks, we were both wilting on the vine.
Oh,
Because, it dawned on me, how would I feel if I knew that I'm spending a significant amount of time every day focusing on things I'm not good at,
yes,
that somebody else
absolutely.
expects me to do, and I know I can't do them that
Yeah.
well yet?
Mhm.
And it would just be so debilitating.
Yeah.
So we started instead putting the enriching things back into the schedule and breaking up those focus times. We still did those focus times, but we
Right.
mixed in the other stuff as well to refresh and to feed the mind. And it made all the
Absolutely.
difference in the world.
Yeah. And I found for each of my kids that refreshing was a little different.
Yeah.
My oldest had to build something. He had to be using his hands. My middle one had to be, donning a costume and running around the house. And, my daughter had to have her sketchbook. But, that feeding was so, so important because their struggles are so prominent when they're learning that it really can sap them quickly in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing just, how people make it through a year. The one question we had from one of our viewers that came in was, from Kendra M, and she said, "I really would like to focus on this idea my last year of homeschooling. How do I do this if I won't have an extra year to get it done?" What would you say to her? I mean, in just response to, your experience.
Yeah. I think by saying, I have to get everything done by this particular time, you're putting
Right.
extra pressure on yourself and your child, rather than where are we now and what is the next step in that direction.
Right.
And I am with you, child, and I will walk beside you as long as it takes.
Absolutely. Yes.
But I want to focus on you as a person rather than this end goal as being more important than the person himself. I
Yeah.
don't know if that helps, but that's kind of how I'm thinking of it.
Yeah, it's kind of that growth mindset versus the goal mindset,
Yeah.
and growth for every person, every child is gonna happen at their own rate, and we can do
And in
only
different
so much.
areas.
Yes,
I
exactly.
see a lot of times I need to celebrate this with you, okay? Or you can celebrate with me, all right?
Yeah.
For many, many years now, our family has been doing scripture memory. We have a little system, a little box that we use. And when all my kids were home, we would do it every day at breakfast. And part of it is everybody reciting together in unison because you
Mm.
review all the verses you've ever learned. It takes
Wow.
about 5 minutes a day. But the big part of it was everybody reciting. And all of those years, Holly would sit there and listen
Yeah.
attentively, but she could not get her language to process quickly enough and regulate her speed enough to recite in unison. She just
Right.
did not have that skill.
Mhm.
But I was trusting that the verses were getting in there.
Right.
So, 2 days ago, we were out visiting one of my older daughters who is married now and has children of her own, and they do the scripture memory box as a family, which is cool.
Oh.
Well, they do it at lunch, and we were there during lunchtime, and so they got out the box, and they read the reference for the first verse, and then as a family, they all started saying it, and Holly, sitting next to me, joined in. She was
Oh.
reciting it with them at the same
Wow.
pace, and some of the words, they had memorized a different translation than she
Uh-huh.
had, but she would just go with it. It wasn't bothering her, it wasn't throwing her off,
Oh,
she was right there
wow.
with them, and I'm sitting there going, "She can do this. She
Wow.
can do this now, yeah, growth."
Woohoo.
It took probably 20
Oh,
years, but she's
right.
at that point now, so
Right.
we were just celebrating that. That
Yeah,
is yeah,
absolutely.
that's
Yes.
so I forget where we started with that, but yes, the idea of we are investing in our children's lives, and we may not
Right.
see a quote return on that investment in the time period that we have in mind.
Yes. Yeah.
But we need to celebrate what we do see as growth. Oh, I know what it was. You were
Yeah.
talking
Yeah, it
about
was
growth in different areas of
yeah.
life.
Mhm.
So she exhibited growth in that area, and I was so excited about that. Well, at the same time, she has seemed to regress in an area of math right now. But I've learned
Oh,
over the years that that often happens. It's really odd. It's almost like
really?
there's a set amount of energy she has to invest in growth.
Oh,
And so if she's really focused on this area and growing in this area, some of the energy comes out of this area over here and diverts to the growth area. Does that make sense?
yeah, it
It's almost
does.
like that's happening.
Yes.
I
Uh-huh.
can't prove this scientifically, but that's
Right.
almost like that's happening. And when that happened originally, I would panic. Oh, we're regressing. We're going to lose it. We're never going to get it back. But it seems like after that growth spurt kind of
Hmm,
stabilizes, then this kind of comes back up too. And maybe
right.
now it's time to go ahead in that area next. But
Wow.
you're going to see growth in many areas of life if we can just open our minds to we are educating the whole person, not
Exactly.
just the academics, not just the mind. So,
Yes.
are you seeing growth in physical areas and even
Absolutely. Yes.
self care for our
Mhm.
kids who struggle with things like that? Are we
Yes.
seeing growth emotionally? Are they able to exhibit more self control? Not perfectly, but
Right.
are we seeing growth in
Growth.
that or other
Exactly.
emotional aspects socially in their
Mhm.
dealings with other people? Are we
Yes.
seeing growth there? Yes, mentally as
Mm,
well.
yep.
Different areas, though, of
Mhm.
maybe we're shooting ahead in language, but we're regressing a little bit in numbers. That's
Right.
okay, but we're still
Yep.
seeing growth mentally. Spiritually, are we seeing
Yes.
growth? So, if we can look at all of those areas of personhood,
Right.
there should be a
Absolutely.
lot to be thankful for.
Oh, yes, so much so, and it as I heard you tell that story, the thing that really just struck me is that you have gotten to know your daughter so well. You've observed her so long that you know now that this is probably going to happen, and now I don't need to panic anymore. but
Yeah.
but letting go of those goals is the only thing that really allows us to take that step back and take that in observation versus in panic. Because when we're in a panic mode, we tend to just want to fix it versus observe. And
Yeah.
and so, over the years that God has taught you, this is how he made your daughter and how he made her to learn. And you can now rest in that because you have that understanding. But to get to that place on how our kids function and what they need and how to nurture that and how to feed that, but yet how to allow just how they learn to happen versus to intervene and to panic. And a lot of times, it's like, how do I switch the curriculum? How do I, because we see
Yeah.
that regression, and then it's like, fix, fix, fix,
Like,
fix.
oh,
Why
this
can
isn't
I?
working.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
Instead of
And the
saying,
one thing that really
yeah.
helped me with that over the years, Peggy, was to
Hmm.
keep a journal.
Oh,
I
yes.
have not kept it every day all year long, not at all. But
Hmm.
anytime I see something that causes me to, hmm, something has changed here. What has
Right.
changed? Then I
It's
try
a
to
great
write down
idea.
what I have observed. And I might keep writing things down every day for a couple of weeks. But
Yeah.
then I can go back and look at it later on if the same thing happens. For example, um, we have we have discovered over time of writing these things down that many times I will see this huge um, growth in her ability to use language and do math. It's like she is having an
Wow.
on day. She is talking to
Huh.
me. She is conversing in full sentences. She is on her math. It's like, wow, something's gone right. That always happens 2 or 3 days before she starts to show illness symptoms, like her nose starts to run or
Wow.
she gets a sore throat. But we have only been able to find that out by keeping these records, these journals over the
Right.
years. And again, I said not every day, but as we notice significant things have changed, we'll write it down. And
Right.
then we started to see these patterns.
Yeah.
So that has helped a lot.
That's great advice, because trying to keep everything in our head, it only works so well, and especially when we get into that more panicked state of,
Yes,
our memory doesn't function like it should, because we put
exactly.
things into there, and or we overthink it, and then it's not quite the raw data that we really need to figure out what truly is going on. So I love that.
And I
Um,
think it helps
yeah.
too if we set, as you said, you had to set intentional times to rest for yourself.
Right.
I think it helps if we set intentional times to sit and reflect on
Yes.
what growth
Yes.
have I seen in each of these areas, mental, physical, as we talked about.
Right.
Um, because otherwise, it's really, at least for me,
Mhm.
it's easy to get focused on the goal that we haven't hit yet. And when we have accomplished something and we check it off, I jettison that out of my head. It's like,
Yes. Yeah.
that's out of here. Now, what do we
Mhm.
have left to do? And all I focus on is what we have left to do
Right.
rather than, and I forget about thinking about and going back and looking for the growth.
Yes. And that growth that we need to celebrate. So let's talk a little bit about celebrations and why are celebrations so, so important?
Why are they important? Well, it's like saying, why is gratefulness important? Gratitude.
Yeah.
Um, it just sets our minds giving thanks to God, giving praise to God for what we have seen His good hand in our lives, the
Yeah.
blessings He has given us. Um, that's all, that's the huge part of it, as well as bolstering us for the journey ahead.
True.
Um,
Yes.
and I think it also helps us keep a check on those perfectionist, goal-obsessed
Uh-huh.
tendencies.
Exactly.
I often think of when my kids were first learning to walk.
Yeah.
They might take a
Mhm.
step or two and then boom, down they went. I did not look at them and say, "Oh, man, I thought you were gonna make it to the couch that time. I can't believe you hit the floor here."
Right.
No, we say, "Look what you did."
Oh, yeah, and we're jumping up and down and clapping and yeah, everything.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's the
Mhm.
same way with if we can view our children that way now because they are putting forth effort,
They
just as
are,
that little baby
absolutely.
did.
Yep.
And so if we can, instead of focusing on what they didn't do,
Right.
focus on what they did,
Yeah.
I think that just helps us have more of that positive attitude and not the panic,
Right.
all the
Yes.
way through our schooling. And when I say celebrate, different people are going to celebrate in different ways.
Yeah.
I'm
Talk
not
to
a
us about
huge
that. Yeah.
throw a party, cook, cook things we aren't supposed to eat type celebration. um, uh, to me, it's more of a celebration in my own heart. It is
Uh,
allowing me a few minutes, giving myself permission for a few minutes to allow my heart to be happy without worrying about the future.
oh, that's beautiful. Yes,
And some that's sometimes hard to do.
it
It's
is.
so easy
Yes.
for us to focus on the future and what if, and I have to have this by this date, and if I don't, what's going to
Right.
happen?
Yeah.
And what's going to be the future for my child if I don't get this done by this day? And we
Mhm.
worry about those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But celebrating this, giving yourself permission to just take a few minutes and allow your heart to be happy
Yeah.
without that pressure on you.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's that release that your heart needs.
Yeah.
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 Because we can get so burdened and feel like, yeah, like everything's on us. And yet, um, like you said, when we are able to just let go. That's what celebrating is. It's letting go. And God built in the timetable for his people was to feast as well as to fast. And
Yes.
it's that feasting time. It's that celebrating. We don't think about anything except the celebration versus okay, now it's the fasting time, it's the praying time, it's the sacrificing time. That's
Mm.
how the calendar for the Israelites was built around. But yet when it's time to celebrate, it's time to celebrate. Stop. Don't work, don't do anything. But building in those stopping places is so countercultural
Yes.
to what is there anything that you've done as a family to or yourself to help with reminding yourself of those stopping places or things
Well,
with that you can celebrate, you know, certain things that just have triggered, we have to stop and celebrate this.
yeah. As I said, I'm a list person too. And so
Yeah,
putting it on my calendar, you need to stop and take assessment regularly.
right.
Um, think back, what are making myself look for areas of growth. That's been a huge part of it. And then just different types of celebration. It's gonna depend on
Right.
your personality and your family culture.
Yeah.
The thing I want to avoid is I did not say, "Holly, we're gonna throw a party because now you can quote verses with everybody," because that would have embarrassed her.
Yes. Yeah.
It would have pointed out what she hasn't been doing all these years, and
Oh, that's true. Yes.
and and so I'm celebrating this in my own heart. It's like, the Lord and I are having a little Snoopy dance over here, but
Yeah.
but I'm but I'm careful not to put her on the spot. So it really depends
Yes.
on your child too.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and we can celebrate in so many ways. Just
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Just
but
having a date night or, with that child, or
Yeah.
having one thing we would do as a family whenever we saw growth in a particular area, it would be double dessert night.
Ah,
So we would do double, or another switch on that is we're going to have dessert first
first.
before we have our meal. We don't do that every day, but
Right. Yes.
sometimes we do things like that. It really depends on what, and this comes back to, as you said, studying your child and knowing your child,
Yes.
what makes her heart sing, what makes her feel encouraged versus
Exactly.
embarrassed.
Right. Yeah. A celebration does have to follow suit with who you're celebrating. It's
Yeah.
just like, you throw a birthday party and some people like surprise parties and some don't. So you don't throw the
Yeah.
surprise party for the person who doesn't like it. But our
They don't call that a blessing, they call that a curse,
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. And yes, and same thing with, all the different ways that we celebrate people. Some, and it goes back to those love languages too,
Mhm. Mhm.
and how our children know and perceive that we love them, and really understanding that about each child. And yeah, there's just so many ways that we can celebrate that progress versus the perfection. And talk to us a little bit about just the journey of you know the ins and outs, the ups and downs, and kind of pressing through hard places when we don't really feel like there's much to celebrate.
There have been many seasons like that, um, where it feels like a winter season,
Hmm.
that you don't see any growth around you,
Yeah.
and you stop and look for it, and then you just don't see it. Um, and so that's when you learn to press into the Lord even more and say, just help me be faithful, because
Yeah.
there is no promise how
Right.
much growth you're going to see or in what areas
True.
you're going to see it. And um, that's a hard concept to accept.
Right.
But again, keeping that journal has helped me when I do see a growth, when we have come out of that winter season and into the spring season. I might see growth in 2 or 3 different areas within a month.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's like, okay, over time, as you said, it's been a journey, but
Yeah.
by keeping a record of those things, when I see something change, I can look back and say, all right, we might be entering another season of months with no growth. But if I just keep doing these small, constant touches, if I'm just faithful,
Right. Yes.
then there's a chance
Yeah.
that I might see growth happen again. And it's only by walking through those seasons, walking through the winter season as well as the spring season, and seeing that happen over time repeatedly.
Yeah.
Just as we have in the physical world, you see the seasons happening repeatedly. When you see that happening repeatedly in your child's life, in their education, that is what gives you hope
Yeah.
that there will be a spring, even though I'm in the middle of winter right now.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
much of what we do, so much of celebration, so much of focusing on growth and not perfection, that all comes down to hope.
It does. It really does. Yes. And we learn to persevere through
Yes.
those seasons too. And I love that you touched on that those quiet seasons aren't quiet that nothing's happening. It's just that we're not seeing anything.
Yes, it's
And
below the surface.
right, yes, because I think we just expect that growth is gonna happen in this nice, even, steady, like, chart. Like, "Oh,
Yes,
yes, your
yeah,
child is supposed to just progress like this," and you do, and you see these flat spots, and you're like, "Whew, I don't know what's going on," and then you see these
yeah,
skyrocketing places, and it's like all the things that need to be put into place, whether it's in their mind or, and just we just don't even know, but we like you said, it's faith. We trust in God, we hope in Him. He's got a plan on how this is all gonna work out, and if our child learns more, that's what they're supposed to happen. If they don't, then that's what's supposed to happen too. That growth happens not only in our brains, but in our hearts and in our dependence on God and our willingness to just trust that His plan is working itself out, whether we see the fruit or
yeah.
not.
It's like Frog and Toad. Okay,
Mhm.
you know the books
Oh, yes,
about
love
Frog
them.
and Toad.
Yes.
There's a story in one of them called The Garden that I just love, and it's where Frog had planted a garden, and it
Uh-huh.
was just gorgeous, and Toad said, "I want a garden like that."
Mhm.
So Frog came over and helped him, and they got the earth ready, and they planted the seeds, and he said, "Now, you just water it and let the sun shine on it, and it will grow." But
Yeah.
Toad got all worked up.
Right.
He was trying to force that garden to grow, and he would sing to it, and he would
Mhm.
yell at it, and he would everything he could think of to force that thing to grow. And finally, he just drops exhausted beside the garden. And when he wakes up, there's some little sprouts that just grew because the sun was shining and the
Right.
rain had fallen.
Yeah.
And and Frog says something like, "Oh, look, you have a beautiful garden too." And Toad is like, "Yes, but it was so much work." Where instead of trusting, you can't force growth. You can't.
Yeah,
You
you
can
can't.
cultivate it, you can encourage, you can
Right.
water and let the sun
Mhm.
shine,
Yeah,
but only God can give that increase. And
exactly.
and so when we work ourselves up about perfection and about the rate of growth, all we're doing is
Yes.
wearing ourselves out like
Yeah,
Toad, but it was really hard work. All we need to do is be faithful.
yeah.
Just do the next thing. Well, I think it
Mhm.
was Oswald Chambers who said, "Pray and do the next thing."
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
that's what it is. And then we leave the growth to the Lord. We
Yeah.
don't we don't neglect our responsibility.
Mhm.
We are faithful in our responsibility, but we have
Absolutely.
to leave that trust that God is going to give the growth as it will work best.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you've laid out a wonderful pathway, talking to us today about feeding, about watching, and keeping a record and then celebrating that if that's all if we can take some takeaways from this and what Sonia's shared with us, that it just sets up a beautiful just foundation for approaching the new year, and focusing on what really matters versus, okay, now we got those educational goals. Let's just press forward and plow through. Unfortunately, your child's mental health and all these other things that we don't nurture that are so important. And unfortunately, that we if we've done it the wrong way, we learn the hard way that should have been focused on. And so it's so important to really focus on your child and your own health and enjoy the journey. Do you have any closing statements before I'm going to have you share about Simply Charlotte Mason too, but as far as encouragement in this area for our families?
Well, I love what you said earlier. That's just been ruminating in my heart through this whole conversation, that it's not just about the child's growth either. That
Yeah.
as we learn to trust the Lord and as we learn to be faithful and as we
Yeah.
learn to focus on the whole person and
Mm,
to celebrate the growth we do see, we are growing ourselves too.
exactly.
And there's no deadline to that,
No. Thankfully, God
We
will perfect it all in the end because I'm
That's
not
right.
anywhere close.
But it's not up to us to have this by this date, it's a
Yeah.
process. It's part of
Mhm.
it's part of being human here on earth, and,
Absolutely.
so let's give our children that same grace as
Yes.
we see the Lord giving us. I love that idea, Peggy. That was
Mm.
great.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and thanks for just sharing and the work that you do. Can you tell our audience a little bit about Simply Charlotte Mason and what you do in relation to that, and just the work that you do on a regular basis? It's
I'm happy to.
inspiring.
For those who do not know, Charlotte Mason was a British educator, lived back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and her ideas basically revolutionized the approach to education over in England
Mm.
because she saw the child as a whole person. It wasn't
Yeah.
just dump facts into their minds and make them parrot it back. So that's what first drew me to this type of approach to
Right.
educating. And I just started learning about it and implementing it with my children. And as they got older, we started producing materials and resources that would help other people implement this type of approach with their children as well.
Hmm.
And I often tell people it's just a hobby that's gotten out of control.
Yeah.
Now, because we have resources for preschool all the way up to high school, and that will help you give your child the art and the music and the poetry, as well as the math and the history and the science, all of those things, and working on good habits and
Yeah.
helping them use their hands to make
Hmm.
things, and just trying to be well-rounded and
Right.
focus on helping that child grow as a person. So that's all available at simplycharlottemason.com.
Awesome. And I will have that link in the YouTube description as well as the podcast. And then you wrote The Anguish Blessing Journey, a Mother's Faith Journal Through Autism. What can people find there? I'll supply the link for that as well.
Yeah, that's also on the simplycharlottemason.com website. That was this Anguishing Blessed Journey was a record of the first year after we diagnosed Holly. It was just the spiritual abyss that I fell
Yeah.
into, and but the Lord had orchestrated things so that I was reading through the Bible all the way that year. And as I met each, I'm going to call it giant
Yes.
in that valley, he gave me just what I needed as I worked my way through scripture. So
Wow.
it's just a record of that and the experiences that he gave
Right.
me to keep me going and to bolster my faith and to help me grow, especially during that first year that was so difficult.
Right. What an encouragement. And I think a lot of times parents feel so alone when, our world shifts like that. And so thank you for sharing, just your heart and how God walked you through that, because I'm sure it's been a blessing over the years to many people that have heard just the struggle. I mean, we see, authors and writers and speakers where they're at now, and a lot of times, a lot of people don't realize the struggles that God used to shape us into who we are. Um, and when we can share from our heart and just where we've questioned God, met God, and how He has responded to our our hearts just in pain. We read David in the Psalms and we relate so well to him because we live that, and we've got to be more like that to one another, because it is encouraging, and it gives us what we need to keep going on. So, yeah.
I will mention one more resource. It's a free download you can get on our
Oh,
website of a workshop that I do called Lessons from the Valley. And
mm.
it's a workshop version of what is in that book, This Anguishing Blessed
Oh,
Journey.
awesome.
So
We'll make sure to
if
find that link.
people would
Yeah.
like to grab that download, I hope it will be encouraging.
Great. Yes, I will make sure to add that to the list as well. Thank you so much, Sonia. I have just, loved chatting with you. Sorry, the hour is already over. It's been so fun. Last fall, I got to spend an entire week with Sonya, and so missing that. And this was just a joy to my heart, and I know that our conversation will bless many. And I thank all of you who have joined us. I've seen people popping on and off, and quite a few of you staying. So thank you for being a part of our audience, and just hope that this conversation has been as encouraging to you as it has been to me. Next episode, we are going to talk with another returning guest, the SPED Homeschool Teaching Manager, Dawn Spence. She's going to talk about how to set up your struggling student for learning success. And she has a background in special education, and homeschooled her two daughters, one with some really profound learning issues. And she is just one of those creative people that can take regular curriculum and do crazy, things with it to help teach kids that you think no curriculum will ever teach them anything. You just can bang your head against the wall. Dawn just has persevered with her own daughter, and her story will just encourage you, as well as her creativeness. And then she's just going to tell you some things you can do to just get set up for success for the school year ahead. So you'll want to join us for that conversation. So thanks again, Sonya. Everybody, make sure you check out simplycharlottemason.com and all of Sonya's resources. Appreciate just the wisdom and the hope that you have shared this hour. It's been a blessing.
Thanks, Peggy. It's been great to be with you.
Yes, and thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you next time here on the show. And the show next week will be on Wednesday night, so just know if you watch live, we have a little change in our time schedule. So hopefully you'll join us then, and until then, everybody, God bless and take care.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.